Hello and assalamu alaikum everyone. I am Kashif Kamran. Welcome to Kashif Kamran's Digital Learning. Today I'm discussing a very important topic, which is about improving your answer quality in the AAA paper, which is of extreme importance because most of the time when the student fail the AAA paper and when they sit down to investigate the reason why they have failed their paper, one of the most important reason of failure is that they're not writing in the quality answer, which is expected by the examining team and by the marker. So let's investigate what are the properties and what are the qualities of this quality answer and what is the process you should undertake to improve the quality of your answer ahead of your upcoming exams. Now, I will be using a process which is known as the RWR process. And this will ensure that your quality of answer is boosted up. The first element of your quality answer is to read and understand the question. Now, reading and understanding the question is extremely important because when you are reading the requirement given in the exam paper, whether that is in section A or section B, or irrespective it is in question 1, 2, or 3, reading the requirement is extremely important with the number of marks given. Now, when you're reading the requirement, at times the student read the requirement in a hurry. So if a requirement contain more than one thing, there is a chance that you might be overlooking that. Because when the examiner is putting in the requirement, at times the examiner use the word and, A-N-D, or at times the examiner use a comma to break the requirement. And if in an exam pressure or while you are doing practice at home, you are in a hurry and you overlook and or a comma, you might be taking a different meaning of the requirement, or you might not be answering the complete requirement. Now, secondly, once you have read the requirement carefully with a comma and, at times the examiner specify something very important in the requirement. Sometimes the examiner says you do not. So you have to restrain from that. If the examiner is saying you should not do this, then you should not do that. Sometimes the examiner specifically say 3 or 4 or 5. Sometimes the examiner says the terminology is significant. So you need to emphasize on these things which the examiner is telling you. Sometimes the examiner stop you from doing something. Sometimes the examiner says, I want this to be done very specifically. Now, if you are overlooking those do's and don'ts of examiner, and you are ignoring that comma and, probably the requirement you have read is not 100% complete. And then when you sit down and answer it, you're not writing a complete answer. Secondly, when you're looking at the number of marks, it's extremely important before you go to the case and start reading the case and start to identify the answer points, that you know the number of marks available for the requirement and you know how many points you need to develop and write in your answer. So that when you go back to the case study, knowing the number of points you have to pick up, you can easily pick those number of points and then blend them down in your good answer. So that is the number one step, reading and understanding the question. Now, the third thing which is connected with reading and understanding the question is that when you go back to the case study and you start reading the case study, it is extremely important that you read the case study from top down in an orderly manner, whether that is a case study for section A or section B. Now, when you're reading through the case study, at the back of the mind, you have the requirement. So the moment you get something in the case study which relates with your requirement, you will annotate that, or you will copy that and paste that in the word processor under the requirement you need to answer. So if you go top down, first of all, you will not miss out any information. Secondly, because the exam requirement is going behind your mindset, so every time you get something which relates with that requirement, it will get annotated and will then copy paste to your word processor. So eventually you are assured that you have read the requirement and you have read the case study very well. Now the second step is to blend that with your good answer. Now comes the step 2, write the answer. Now, while you were reading through the case study and you were understanding the requirement, you must have copy pasted things on your word processor. for any particular requirement. For example, you were doing the question number 2A from the March June 22 exam. So you must have copied the requirement question number 2A on your word processor, and every relevant point you got from question 2A in terms of the case study, you must have copy pasted that under the question 2A on the word processor. Now it's time to blend the answer. Now, when you sit down and you write the answer, it is extremely important that every point should be developed. Every point should be well explained. Now, a well explained point or a well developed point cannot just be a sentence. I've seen so many students' answers and assignments when I check them that they just put a sentence and they believe this is explanation or this is evaluation. This is not. Even in the recent examiner report, the September 22 examiner report for AAA, the examiner criticized this methodology of student of not developing the point well. If you believe what is the definition of a good developed point, it's like 3 to 4 sentences long. Now, for example, you're writing a risk, which is quite a big topic, then a well-developed risk might be on a 4-sentence long phenomena, because you need to write the accounting treatment, you need to justify the materialities, you need to think about the risk and impact. So it certainly goes to that context, even 4 to 5 sentences if the accounting treatment is very complex or very productive. If you're writing an ethical issue, at least you need to pick up the issue and then justify, okay, this is the self-review thread, and then explaining why it is a self-review thread. So automatically can stretch to like 3 sentences. So 3 to 4 sentences on a minimum is like a well-developed point in AAA, which can fetch you good marks. Every point you have picked from the case study while you were reading it, and now you are developing it in your answer, should have a heading. Try to give a heading so that when the marker is checking your answer, looking at the heading, the marker can identify, okay, which point you're trying to write on. And okay, this is the point you took from the case study. Now, even when I'm checking the assignments and some student give me the assignments with headings and paragraph, it becomes so easier to judge, okay, this is the point, and yes, this point was in the case study. And then marking it becomes very easier. And for you, the opportunity for scoring better improves. So every time, try to ensure when you're structuring your answer, whether it is in the question 1, 2, or 3, give headings followed by a reasonable paragraph, which is developing a point. A lot of time, the student writes the answer, which is in a large chunk of a paragraph, and they don't give a para break, even though in that one chunk of paragraph, they're writing multiple points. Every time when you have ended with one point, give a break and start the next point from the next line. And if you give headings, that is an added advantage. So try to break your points. Start your point from a new paragraph, from a new line, so that when anyone is checking your paper, exactly knows, okay, this is the start of a new point. And in that way, you can also assure yourself how many points have you written against the marking scheme. So writing the answer is extremely important. Now, yes, the professional marks will make an impact when you're writing the answer. I've already covered the professional marks videos separately, and I will be doing them again in my December 22 webinar as well. So that's a different story. I'm not discussing the professional marks being embedded in your writing of the answer, but it's more about a technique of developing a point and ensuring the points are picked from the case study, and those points are then blended in your answer. It is a case-oriented answer, a case-specific answer. If you try to write a journalized answer, which is far away from the case study, or you try to write an answer which is around the topic, but not around the case study, you will fail. So writing a good answer also involved the blending of the case, which was the step number 1. You read the case, you extracted the points, you put those points on the word processor, and then you start developing the answer. Third, now once you wrote the answer at home and you were practicing, how would you assure that you wrote a good answer? How would you assure that there is no problem in my answer? How would you ensure that whether your answer has met the quality threshold or not? Review the examiner report. Now, for example, you were attempting the question number 2A of the March-June 22 exam, or you were attempting the question number 1 of the March-June 22 exam. You will download the examiner report for March-June 22, and you will open the question number 1, specific comments. There are journal comments given in the examiner reports for the overall exam setting. And then there are specific comments on a question by question basis. So if you have attempted the answer to question number 1, for example, you'll open up the examiner report for question number 1 and you will read it like a story from the start to the end. When you're reading the examiner report for question number 1 or question number 2, examiner will be telling you, examiner will be sharing with you the criticism. Examiner will be sharing with you some suggestions. Examiner will be sharing with you some thought process about what was done wrong in the question number 1, or what was done good in the question number 1, and what the future student should do. Now, you know your answer. You can keep your answer on the screen, and you can have a printout of the examiner report, or you can read the examiner report on the screen as you wish. But while you're reading the examiner answer, wherever he tells you that this was done good by the student, try to relate that with your answer. Try to see, okay, this is what the examiner is saying good, and I did that. So wherever you have done that good in your answer, give yourself +1, for example. Wherever you have done something wrong and the examiner is saying this was done wrong by the student, and you say, oh, I have done this as well, give yourself -1, just to see, okay, where you're going good and where you're going bad. There is no negative marking, but just for the sake of guidance, I'm saying, okay, +1, -1. So you know, okay, this point will not be marked, or you can give yourself a 0. You read the examiner report with your answer, giving yourself a +1 or a -1 or a +1 and a 0. And at the end of the day, judge your answer quality. Judge how good your answer was. How many times you got a +1 and how many times you got a 0 or a -1. So how many points were good in terms of the examiner report? And if the examiner is giving any suggestion for future candidates, follow that suggestion. If the examiner is giving you some examples of what could be a good answer, follow that. So I think your answer needs to be evaluated in line of the examiner report, not in line with the examiner answer. Now, the problem is that the student, when they write the answer, they jump directly to the examiner answer and they start reading the examiner answer and they say, oh, this is such a big answer. Then they start asking the tutor, how can we write this big answer? Or is my answer worthy? Examiner has quoted the reference number of the standards. Examiner has given the name of the standards. Examiner has given the number of the standards. Examiner has written for a 6 marks audit procedure, 12 audit procedures. So should I be writing 12? Now that sort of question comes in when you look at the examiner answer, because again, the problem is the students are not understanding this phenomena that firstly, the examiner answer is a tutorial guidance. It is a broader answer. It is trying to cover every possible situation in the case study, just for the sake of guidance and just for the sake of learning for the future exams. You can learn from examiner answer that, okay, this could have been a valid procedure. This could have been a valid procedure. This could have been a valid procedure, or this could have been a valid risk, or this could have been a valid ethical issue. But you're not writing all of them because you need to look at the number of marks. So if the examiner has written 6 ethical issues for 6 marks, and the question was for 3 marks, then you should have written just 3 ethical issues out of the 6 there. So you can learn from examiner answer, but if you try to just copy the examiner answer and just try to make the examiner answer the benchmark, and you say, okay, this is the benchmark which I will pass. If I not do this, I will fail. Then honestly, the passing rate for AAA will be 0%. It will not even be 34%. So try to come out of the examiner answer mindset. Examiner answers should be read, but with a different mindset for the learning purpose, for looking at some extra points which you didn't wrote in your answer, for looking at how the examiner develop a point, not the length of the point. So you can learn things from examiner answer, but probably the students are learning wrong things from the examiner answer and not focusing on the fact that there is a document which is written by the same examiner, known as an examiner report, which tells you about the do's and don'ts, which give you suggestions, which gives you constructive feedback, which even criticize you. So there is a blending of comments, and those really help you evaluate the answer you have written. So if you read specific comments of examiner and relate that with your answer, at the end of this exercise, you will find some good points and you'll find some bad points within your answer. And that's where you are learning. Next time you attempt a question on the same topic, the answer quality will automatically improve. So ensure that whichever exam paper you are attempting from the recent papers, 2020, 2021, and 2022, ensure you are reconciling your answer with the examiner report and try to identify where was the shortcomings. If you're capable of picking the shortcomings, you are capable of overcoming the exam pressure, and you're capable of improving your answer quality threshold. So this is basically the RWR process. Read and understand the question and the case study, write the answer, develop the point, give headings, ensure that every well-developed point is reasonably long, like 3 to 4 sentences, and then review the examiner report for the relevant question, just to identify the plus points and the minus points in your answer, or the strength and the weaknesses of your answer, to give you a holistic idea where you are standing ahead of your exams. So I hope you will implement this RWR process for your upcoming exams, and you still have plenty of time ahead of December 22 exams to practice according to this RWR process, which will definitely boost quality. This is your tutor Kashif Kamran signing off from this RWR process, improving answer quality, and I wish you all the very best of luck for your upcoming exams. Take care, goodbye, and Allah Hafiz.